Now I'm going to work on the other end of the tailpiece and get the hinge attached so that the tailpiece can actually be mounted to the guitar. I have these bronze pieces made, and they serve as the back end of the tailpiece. They go down the side of the guitar and get attached through the screw holes, and then there's a big hole for an output jack. So I will cut or chisel mortises into the ebony for these knobs or ears, whatever you call them, to be recessed into. And then there will be a hinge pin, and the ebony will be able to pivot. It won't be locked in one place. But before I can do that, I need to increase the thickness of the tailpiece in this area, the ebony. It's just barely over the thickness of these ears, so I'm going to add about another 1/8 of an inch to it by gluing this other piece of ebony to the bottom side. And that piece won't actually be under any great strain because the hinge pin itself will be going through the main chunk of ebony, but this just makes it look a little nicer and gives me a little bit more of a margin of error too. The extra piece is glued onto the bottom, and I trimmed it flush with the sides of the main part of the tailpiece. So now I'm going to put some white paint on here so I can see what I'm doing, and then mark off and start making the mortises so the hinge piece can fit in. Alright, so there are both mortises cut, and the hinge fits just fine in there. It's not sticking up, so I know the mortises are deep enough, and there's a little bit of play from side to side, which I want. So now the next step will be to drill a hole through the ebony all the way to the other side for the hinge pin. Alright, I've got the hole drilled, and I shaved a little bit of ebony off the bottom of the tailpiece just to give the bronze piece a little extra clearance so it could pivot back and forth. So here's my hinge pin. It's just a 1/8 inch diameter piece of steel rod that I buy at a hobby shop. Now everything should line up, and there we go. So you can see there's quite a bit of play in the bridge, which is great because the amount it has to tip relative to the hinge piece really depends on the height of the bridge, and that of course depends on the neck angle. So I can't have this in just one fixed position, or it would put undue strain on the joint there. So this is exactly what I want. Now I'll move on to doing the aesthetic stuff, carving some nice recesses into the top face of the ebony, and then I'm going to put a cap over the area where the strings sit, just to cover up the ball ends. So you can see that's beginning to take some shape. I just find it a lot more interesting to look at than just having that uniformly flat piece there. So I'll keep scraping and finish that up. So there's a little bit of cleanup left, but that's the general idea. So now the last thing I'm going to do is glue another cap of ebony on the back side, and that'll strengthen this area that I routed out. It gets pretty thin here, and I don't want the ebony to crack, so it'll strengthen it. Plus it allows me to contour the back side of the tailpiece a little bit and makes it a little more interesting to look at than being just flat across. And then I'm also going to glue a piece along the top. I'll cut it out in the same arc as the string stop, but it'll hang over and that'll cover up the ball ends of the strings. So I roughed out this piece and sanded the arc into it just like I want it to be. Now I'll glue this on here. Then once the glue dries on that, I'll rough out this other piece of ebony and glue it onto the back side of the tailpiece. Okay, I've got these two pieces glued on, so now I'll trim them and do a little contouring on the back side and smooth everything out here, and I'm just about done. I've sanded the ebony up to 320 grit. Now I'm going to give it a little bit of buffing with some jeweler's rouge, and then I'll be all done. Looks pretty shiny now. The only thing left is to install the bronze side piece and put in the hinge pin. The hinge can still move freely from side to side and front to back, exactly as planned, and that's it. Now once this glue dries, I'll just sand that smooth and the tailpiece is done.